Hello everyone, and welcome to today's session on macroeconomic theory. In this lecture, we will explore the definition and evolution of macroeconomics, tracing its development from classical theories to the more recent contributions of the new Keynesian school. Macroeconomics is the study of the economy as a whole, focusing on large-scale economic phenomena that influence national and global economic performance. Rather than examining individual markets or households, macroeconomics takes a broader view, analyzing key variables like employment, inflation, gross domestic product, GDP, and economic growth. The primary objective is to understand how these factors interact to shape the performance of economies and how different policies affect these outcomes. The study of macroeconomics is vital because it helps answer fundamental questions about how economies function on a large scale. How can governments control inflation? What policies can reduce unemployment and spur economic growth? What causes economic recessions? And how can they be mitigated? By understanding these broader economic forces, we are better equipped to make informed decisions in both the public and private sectors. Historically, macroeconomic thought has evolved through several schools of thought, each contributing unique insights into economic dynamics. Initially, classical economics dominated the field, with its focus on the self-correcting nature of markets. Classical economists, including Adam Smith, believed that the economy is self-regulating and that government intervention was unnecessary. According to this view, markets naturally adjust through the forces of supply and demand, and economic equilibrium is reached without the need for external intervention. This idea is known as Say's law, which states that supply creates its own demand. Classical economists also argued that wages and prices are flexible, meaning they adjust quickly to restore balance in the economy. However, during the Great Depression of the 1930s, the classical view was challenged. Unemployment reached unprecedented levels, and the economy remained stagnant despite the absence of war or other major disruptions. This period highlighted the failure of classical theories to explain the prolonged economic downturn. Enter John Maynard Keynes, whose work marked the birth of modern macroeconomics. Keynes argued that the economy could be unstable, primarily due to fluctuations in aggregate demand, AD. Unlike classical economists, Keynes believed that wages and prices are not always flexible, particularly in the short run, and that economic downturns could persist for long periods without government intervention. Keynes introduced the idea that government policies could help stabilize the economy. He emphasized the importance of effective demand, which is the total demand for goods and services in the economy. During times of recession, Keynes argued that governments should increase their spending and lower taxes to boost aggregate demand and jumpstart economic activity. This approach became known as expansionary fiscal policy, and it was designed to offset declines in private sector demand. Keynes also highlighted the role of monetary policy, where increasing the money supply could lower interest rates, encouraging investment and consumption. However, Keynes acknowledged the possibility of a liquidity trap, where increasing the money supply would not be effective in stimulating demand, especially when interest rates are already near zero. In such situations, he preferred using fiscal policy over monetary policy to revive economic activity. Despite its successes, Keynesian economics has faced criticism over the years, particularly from monetarists, who argued that inflation was primarily driven by excessive growth in the money supply. Monetarists, led by Milton Friedman, rejected the Keynesian focus on fiscal intervention, believing instead that controlling the money supply is the key to managing inflation and stabilizing the economy. According to monetarists, expansionary fiscal policies, if coupled with monetary policies that increase the growth of the money supply, would only lead to higher inflation without solving unemployment or boosting long-term economic growth. Monetarists also challenged the Phillips curve, which suggested a trade-off between inflation and unemployment. Monetarists argued that this trade-off only existed in the short run, and that in the long run, inflation and unemployment are not directly related. They believed that the economy has a natural self-correcting mechanism, where inflation is ultimately a result of too much money chasing too few goods. For monetarists, controlling inflation was paramount, and they argued that monetary policy, particularly controlling the growth rate of the money supply, was the most effective tool for achieving this. In the 1970s, the rise of new classical economics introduced new perspectives, particularly focusing on the role of expectations. Economists like Robert Lucas argued that individuals and firms make decisions based on rational expectations, meaning that they anticipate the effects of economic policies and adjust their behavior accordingly. New classical economists believed that if people expect inflation to rise, they will act in ways that will push inflation even higher, rendering expansionary fiscal policies ineffective in the long run. Their models emphasized the importance of supply-side policies that improve the efficiency of labor and capital markets, believing these would lead to sustainable long-term growth. New classical economists also introduced the idea of market clearing, where all markets, including labor and goods, naturally adjust to achieve equilibrium, even in the face of shocks. The central tenet of new classical thought is that government intervention should be minimal, as market forces, guided by rational expectations, are generally sufficient to maintain economic stability. At the same time, new Keynesian economics emerged as a response to some of the limitations of both Keynesian and new classical models. New Keynesians argued that markets are not always efficient and that imperfections, such as price rigidities and information asymmetries, can prevent markets from clearing. For example, in labor markets, wages may be sticky, meaning they do not adjust downward quickly enough during recessions. This can lead to prolonged unemployment, a situation that Keynesians argue requires active government intervention to resolve. New Keynesians integrated microeconomic foundations into Keynesian ideas, showing how individual market imperfections contribute to broader economic fluctuations. They emphasized that economic fluctuations in output and employment could result from issues like imperfect competition, sticky prices, and other market failures that prevent the economy from adjusting smoothly. As we look at the current state of macroeconomics, it's clear that no single theory fully explains all aspects of economic behavior. Each school of thought, whether it's classical, Keynesian, monetarist, new classical, or new Keynesian, offers valuable insights into different aspects of how economies function. Modern economists generally agree that short-term stabilization policies can influence economic behavior, but long-term growth is primarily driven by factors such as capital accumulation, technological progress, and productivity improvements. In conclusion, while the debate between these different schools of thought continues, one thing remains clear. The study of macroeconomics is essential for understanding the forces that shape national and global economies. The policies we implement today will determine the economic outcomes of tomorrow.